Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Let's look back at some satellite imagery on Sunday, because some of the scattered storms we did see across the state as I kind of rock back and forth here, these storms were kind of on the backside of what was once Hurricane Henri, which went into the northeast. There was also a stalled out frontal boundary right in through here that produced some very heavy rainfall to our south in South Carolina. But I thought you might find it interesting to see what these storms look like from space, because as each individual cluster goes up, like the group here just north of Raleigh or the ones over here along the east coast, they often put down what are called outflow boundaries. And do you see, like, look at this ring of cloud right there. See that? As I go back and forth, you'll see how that just runs away from the base of the storm and eventually kind of clears things out. That's what outflow can do. But also on the leading edge of outflow, we can sometimes blow up new storms like you see there. But one last thing I want to point out is as we got towards sunset, right there's the sunset line. The haze you see in place here, that is actually still from some of the wildfire smoke in the western United States. Now, over our last 7 days, we've had rainfall from many different sources. Starting first in the Carolinas, we had Fred. So Fred last week doing this, dumping rain clear up to New England. We had the stalled out boundary right in through here yesterday. That's what some of the heaviest rains here in parts of South Carolina came from. Tropical storm and Hurricane Henri went right here. So that one missed us, but we did get the flow around it yesterday, which was what I was just talking about. But I'd like to point out a couple of other things. Last week, the stalled out boundary here stretching all the way back to Texas, producing some locations that got well in excess of 6 inches of rain. And I'm sure you saw over the weekend in Middle Tennessee around Nashville, actually right on the town called Centerville right here. Some places saw up to 18 inches of rainfall from a series of storms that trained or followed one another. So we've had some incredibly heavy rainfall here just in the last 7 days. Also take note, rain has moved into the western Corn Belt, into the Dakotas, into the Canadian Prairie, places that it has avoided all year long. And that's helping to kind of erase some of the recent deficits in total precipitation. So the next map here looks at the last 30 days in terms of percent of normal on precipitation. And we can now see how wet it's been over in the Appalachian Mountains. And then as you get into the very middle, the very center of North Carolina, we have a couple of drier pockets in there that have missed out on some of these storms. But we've been wet over the last month also along the coast here. So just a good map to kind of assess what our most recent precipitation patterns have looked like. And we can take this map and put some other numbers on it. That's what I'm going to do for you next. So from July 25th through August 22nd, that's a 30-day time period, you're now seeing the total rank out of 129 years where we sit on precipitation. So when you think about North Carolina, overall, we sat on the wetter side of average in the last 30 days. And why I'm bringing this up is because I think we're about to see a bit of a pattern shift going into September that could result in some drier conditions showing up. And we're going to talk about that and why in a few moments. But do note, where we're expecting more heavy rain in this part of the Corn Belt. This has been an area that's been extremely dry. And I spent part of last week in Indiana, and there's some fields in here that if they got one more rainfall, it would really finish off the crop nicely. But it has been dry over the last month in this area. But the only thing carrying the crop here over the last month has been just heavy dew in the morning. So speaking about that morning moisture, take a look at our latest all hazards weather map. Just before the sun rose, we did have right in through here some areas of very dense fog this morning. We're going to keep an eye on that as the sun rises and hopefully kind of evaporates that fog as the heat begins to build in for the day. That's another important piece of this forecast. We are going towards some hotter days here in September, more like what we typically get in mid-July. So we'll talk about that in a second. High pressure's in control today, and that's what I really want to get to. We have our Bermuda high sitting almost right over the top of Bermuda, and we have another high pressure center that's sitting right over here over the Cumberland River. And what's going on is all of that flow is kind of coming together right in through here. So you're going to notice in these precipitation forecasts that the heaviest rain for the next week or so is going to be offshore. And I can show you that just by saying, let's just say next 7 days compared to average, what are we looking at here? It's not as though we won't have any precipitation. There'll be scattered storms in the heat of the day because the atmosphere is, as I told my 3rd and 4th grade boys soccer team on Saturday, I said the atmosphere is juiced, so make sure that you are bringing plenty of water to play soccer with because it's hot and humid, and the human body tends to perspire a lot in those situations to try to get that sweat to evaporate. But if the atmosphere is saturated, it's hard to get the sweat to evaporate, and that's why we tend to struggle with dehydration. Okay. Anyways, our next 7 days, the map you've been looking at, just notice an area to point out here. This part of the Western Corn Belt, the Canadian Prairie, this is an area I point out to be quite dry. There's that frontal boundary, sags farther to the south, maybe some scattered storms over parts of the Cotton Belt in Alabama, Georgia, but not so much in South Carolina. And all we're looking at over the next week for us is pretty much scattered storms. That's it. Scattered daily storms like I showed you at the beginning. Tropics are, I can say they're relatively quiet for right now. Over the next 5 days, the National Hurricane Center is only given this one tropical disturbance, a 20% chance of developing, and another one over here coming out of the Caribbean, a 20% chance. But the point, I guess, behind this is that the waves that we're watching out there, let's just kind of play the infrared satellite data here. There's just no real organized tropical waves right now. That's where we get clusters of big tropical thunderstorms. We just don't see them. They're just not out there right now to kind of serve as the seed for a bigger tropical cyclone. I'm more concerned about the one that's going to be developing off of this convection here in the Caribbean, but that's still not something that's going to target North Carolina, at least with the latest evidence we've got. So what's the probability of getting another tropical disturbance to form? Well, as I just play this out, this is like a 3-day sliding window. We're out to the end of, this is the end of August now, beginning of September. We just don't see much. There's just not much on the horizon here in the next, let's just call it 10 days or so. As I said, the one I'm most concerned about is right in through here, but where it goes once it gets into the Gulf is still largely unknown, as this system has yet to develop. So that's your tropical update at this point. Not a whole lot of action going on that's going to impact North Carolina. So where is the action? What's going on here? I think to understand that, I want to take you up to jet stream level, and we're going to look at troughs and ridges. You see, as I go through Monday into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you're going to notice several little shortwave troughs here. And they're all running around a broader ridge in that place, which means each one of them kind of gets pushed like that. Therefore, the flow over North Carolina is going to be weak, and we're under a ridge, and that ridge is what's going to keep things quite warm throughout this week. But we're going to pump in the moisture. This is all the way up to next Saturday, Sunday. I mean, the ridge is really going to be sitting right over the top of us. So the heat's going to come back on. Our rainfall is going to come largely from scattered thunderstorm events, and that seems to be the way of it, at least through the next week and a half. If I just keep playing this out, there's no large pattern change to take us away from that. See, another trough comes sweeping in here. So let me play this for you. Go back to the beginning, because I was just watching it myself. As we go through the day on Monday, just notice by afternoon on the heat, we just get scattered storms. Cannot predict where these things are going to be. But that's why you're going to look at your forecast and go, oh, there's the 30 to 50% chance of storms every day. It's just coming on the heat. This is now getting into tomorrow morning. By afternoon, see it once again. No real strong frontal boundaries to speak of. All outflow-driven thunderstorms. And even out toward Wednesday, the atmosphere is just going to pop in the afternoon. So that's our high-res NAM. Let's go from there over to the European model and see where it takes us. As we play forward, you're just going to see flashes of green in the afternoon. So here's Monday afternoon. See some little flashes of green there. Let's just play it into the overnight. Get out to Tuesday. That's Tuesday afternoon. See it again. You see the action's all on the northern plains. We got this feed of moisture coming in. So by Wednesday evening, another flash of green. That tells me the model's picking up on isolated storms. And even as I get out there toward Friday, when our next system barrels through the Corn Belt, we're still just open moisture transport off the Atlantic and out of the Gulf, and we just flash with green. Now, here's what the European model is attempting to do with that tropical system in the Bay of Campeche. But it's important to note that at this point, it's not doing that. It has yet to turn that thing to the north and cause problems. So we get us all the way out to early next week, and we still just have flashes of green. And therefore, all we can make of that is that our precipitation pattern is going to largely be coming from scattered storms. And the models tend to struggle with amounts. They can't predict that. It's too small of a scale of a feature, those scattered storms, to be captured with the current model resolution. So the map you're now looking at just, again, takes you out through the next week. It's from the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center, and they're part of the National Weather Service. And overall, we just don't see much precipitation adding up. Okay. Now, what does all this mean? Well, our soil moisture values are looking pretty good. We do have a couple of pockets where things are a bit drier, but the heavy rains from Fred erased the drought to the north of us in the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia and West Virginia, and overall, most places to our west are quite wet. But I bring this up just to show you that where those heaviest rains were coming in right in through here, this is an area that's been extremely dry. It's going to be too late for some of the crop in that area, but overall, heavier rainfall across some of the driest parts of the United States. So where do we go by day 10? So we can look out here day 10 to day 15 and look squarely at week 2. Well, the jet stream's still doing this. And if there's troughs here, and they're sweeping through the northern plains, we kind of just have weak upper level flow. And when we have weak upper level flow, the atmosphere says, well, not a whole lot going on there. So they're taking one tropical system here. That's the one we talked about a few moments ago. But you see how the models are dry in through this area? That means that none of the long-range models at this point, the European or the GFS, are predicting any sort of tropical activity near our southeast coast. But in the midsection of the country, a lot of storms in through here. Just daily storms. Same thing for us in North Carolina. A lot of scattered storms. Now, the heat today is right over parts of the Mid-South. This is all heat advisory in through this area. And I wanted to show you a graphic that kind of points out how we avoided heat this year. There's a dashed line that runs in the middle of this. That's the last 180 days of average daily temperature. And then the black line, the solid one, represents what we had each day. Now look, going back to, this is March and April and May. Wow, we were swinging wildly around average. But once you got to about June, we'd bring in heat for a few days and cool off. Heat for a few days, cool off. Heat for a few days. And now, even though we're going to go over to some hotter days, it's hot compared to average. So if the average temperature is already starting to cool off seasonally, our peak is way back here, about July, third week of July, okay? Well, to be hotter than average now means we're going to resist going to these super high peaks we're capable of. Let me show you what I'm talking about. As I played this through Monday, let's maybe blow that up a little bit. There we go. If I go through Monday into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, this is a lot of days with highs in the low 90s. Maybe getting up there 93, 94, 95. And the heat index is going to be high because of the humidity in the air. But that's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I hope you just kind of watched North Carolina. We see just a lot of days here where the temperatures are going to be at a minimum in the upper 80s for the afternoon highs, and then at a maximum probably in that mid-90 range, maybe up to 95 degrees. And how long does it last? Well, you can see, as I showed you at the pattern, the ridge that was kind of sitting here while the troughs came into the northwest. We're going to keep that 3 to 8 degree bias in our temperatures going through much of the day 5 through day 10 time period. Now, as I told you, the atmosphere's got a lot of moisture in it. And I'm just going to show you this animation quickly. These colors, okay, in through here, that tells me where there's a lot of precipitable water for those scattered storms to use. And as I just go through, this is really quickly, but through the next 10 days, nothing comes through to clear that out. Do you notice that? There's no front that seems to make it all the way to North Carolina to clear out that high humidity, high precipitable water air. So you're hot and you're going to be humid and the atmosphere is going to pop. It's going to pop with storms. And that tends to last, let's just squeeze that back out there. This tends to last all the way through of course, the end of the month and then into the beginning of September, slightly above normal temperatures, while the cooler track is through the Canadian Prairie into the Canadian Maritime. Now, what I wanted to get to by building all of this up is I want to talk about this. Here we go. Long-range forecast released on Friday. We get these every Friday afternoon and every Thursday afternoon and every Monday afternoon. So we get it late in the day. What you're looking at here is the forecast through October 1st. So this is the whole of September. And interestingly enough, it seems as though the ECMWF model is building in some higher pressure over North Carolina. And while this model cannot accurately predict tropical cyclone development out at these timescales, it doesn't know if there's going to be a tropical system that could come through and ruin this forecast. But this is the third one of these forecasts in a row that I've seen it favoring drier conditions for much of the mid-Atlantic and the Carolinas. All the moisture seems to be tucked away back in the midsection of the country where we expect it to be quite stormy. Now, I went looking for reasons for this other than just building in higher pressure and the model not seeing any tropical systems. I was like, well, does it have anything to do with, well, let's do this first. Anything to do with ocean temperatures? Because we do have our La Nina that's trying to build. But over the last few weeks, the trade winds which keep these La Ninas going, which is the thing that helps us understand our weather patterns in North Carolina, they slackened a bit. So it's not like we're seeing super strong trades. They'll still have a La Nina this fall, but it's just not going to be there. And then I went and said, well, what's the MJO doing? Well, the models are expected to take the MJO into null space, pop it out into phase 8-1, and then curl it back over to 3-4-5. Now you're going, what the heck does that mean? It's going to take it back to Africa, pull it through the Indian Ocean, and then send it to north of Australia. That's all this means. That's where the best storms are going to be in the tropics. But the low amplitude of the MJO doesn't really offer any concrete evidence of what it's going to do to our pattern. I don't think it matters at all. And then I said, well, are we kind of pulling some of the momentum out of the atmosphere? And we have done that. And what I'm concerned about is that the drop-off of momentum right in through here, that's where our part of the jet stream lives, could just allow for some retrograding high pressure. That means that the Bermuda High could slide a little bit farther to the east. And that's why we come back to this map. I think we could have a chance at being, a little drier than normal as we go through the month of September. Again, this is barring any tropical development, which could ruin this whole forecast. But a map I almost showed you a few moments ago is this one. This is the CFSV2. This is kind of the U.S. equivalent of the European model. And it's also drier. See it? That's in week 3 and even in week 4. So at least there's some consistency here in the models. And what are we looking at in terms of temperatures? Well, that same 30-day time period does favor a slight warm bias. So we could have a warmer September here and start to see things drying out a little bit. That's what I think I wanted to point out to you as we wrap up this forecast. I will talk to you again next week. Until then, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.